intimidating walking into this building and going into the green room. The green room, basically green. And looking at the list of the esteemed people who have spoken at this building. And I really must thank Christina Arnold and Kathleen Owens from the Diversity Learning Center from the Grand Rapids Community College for bringing me here. Please give them a round of applause. And I especially thank them because I'm not necessarily like a safe choice. A few hours ago when I was in Christina's office, she had just gotten a call from an alumnus of GRCC who called and left a message, who was very angry that GRCC invited every legal to come here. I'm even happier now that I'm here, and I hope that the alumnus is here to listen to this. First of all, I am here illegally. The action, I'm here illegally without authorization, but I am not illegal, because no human being is illegal. And the truth is, I am only the illegal that you haven't bothered to understand. I don't know if you can feel this, and sometimes I feel like I'm a walking history book that no one has opened. The fact that history is in many ways cracking right before our eyes. The very idea of who an American is, who we define as American, at the heart of a demographically changing country. And we cannot talk about history and immigration without talking about Ellis Island, the country's first immigration system. The so-called islands of hopes and islands of tears, where nearly 1 out of 3 Americans, including many people in this room, 1 out of 3 Americans can trace their ancestors because of Ellis Island. Between 1892 and 1955, about 12 million undocumented white people from Europe crossed the border on the Atlantic Ocean and landed on Ellis Island without papers. Many of them didn't speak English, many of them didn't have money. Irish, Italians, Eastern European Jews, Germans showed up. They were expected, they were welcomed. And here we are almost 60 years later, and America is facing yet another migration of 12 million undocumented people, but this time not from Europe, but from across the world, particularly from Latin America. So what's the difference? Is it because we look different? Is it because we have different accents? Is it because we eat different food? And for a country that was built and replenished by immigrants, the border that has so dominated our public consciousness is only one part of a much bigger conversation and a much longer history about immigration. I am only one of 11 million. The estimated 11 million undocumented immigrants in our country, many of us Americans in all the pieces of papers. And I am, to be perfectly honest, the most privileged undocumented immigrant in America. While people are getting deported every day, about 1,000 deportations a day, while people fear for their lives while they go to work and while they go to school, here I am flying around the country talking about my life, reminding people that immigration is way more complicated than the illegal in our minds and the U.S.-Mexico border. And as I travel around the country, I ask questions like, where are you from? How did you get here? How do you define America? So before I go on, I kind of want to make sure we're on the same page, right? When we talk about immigration, what are we really talking about? What are we really talking about?
How will we raise the house?
You want to make this video so people share a story? It's admirable story.
You know when they say that like Twitter and Facebook and YouTube are like narcissistic platforms? It's interesting because the undocumented community, particularly young undocumented people, use Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube to tell people that they actually exist. It's a way of actually validating who they are. Right? So immigration, above all, is about stories. So here's kind of my abbreviated story. I am in America because of the sacrifices of my family. That's my grandmother and my grandfather. My grandparents legally immigrated from the Philippines to Silicon Valley, California in the mid-1980s. A few years later, my grandfather, who was a security guard, changed his name from Teofilo to Ted after Ted dancing in shoes. Sometimes you gotta know how to read your name. Because grandparents cannot legally petition grandkids, it's not considered a close enough of a relationship. And because my mother has been denied, was denied a visa to come here, including a tourist visa, because she's not educated and she doesn't have money, my grandparents decided, my grandfather in particular, to save enough money to get me, his only grandson, a passport and a green card to come to America. And my mother gave me up to me their life. I arrived here on August 3rd, 1993, and I was totally confused. My introduction to American culture was the Nancy Kerrigan thing, when her got left, the O.J. Simpson trial, and Seinfeld. I thought everybody was Jewish. The two biggest memories was, the first one was going to the grocery store and seeing the aisle of dog food. Where I come from, we feed the dogs like leftover. And I've never seen like dog food in a can. And I didn't understand why the dog food cost as much as the people food. And the other thing was when I had to sing and memorize the national anthem for the first time, because I actually thought it said, "Oh Jose, can you see?" I'm not kidding. So I'm like thinking to myself, I just got here and they're so friendly. Like my name is in the national anthem. And apparently in class, you know, in homeroom, I'd like stand there like this, and I'm like smiling throughout the whole song. And finally, one of my classmates, Sharman Paul, African American kid, really tall guy. At one point, I think he saw me smiling, and he like looked down and was like, "Dude, Jose, like we're not talking about you." But the biggest surprise was how this country talked about race and talks about race. Where I come from, I learned to speak a little bit of English by listening to Whitney Houston and Michael Jackson songs in the Philippines. And I didn't realize they were black until I got here, because we all call them Americans. And so I started kind of thinking that maybe this country invented white as much as it invented black. And if you're like me and you look Asian but you have a Latino name, like, what do you fit in this like black or white dynamic? Then 4 years later, when I was 16, like any 16-year-old, I go to the DMV to get a driver's permit. I didn't tell my grandparents, I just went. And when I showed the DMV woman, these are my only two pieces of ID that my grandfather gave me. That's the green card, and that's the passport. So I gave this to this woman. And this woman that gave me looked at the green card, she flipped it twice, and then she lowered herself in the booth, and she looked at me and she said, "This is fake. Don't come back here." And you know, my first instinct was she's lying. And my second instinct was, wait a second, maybe she thinks I'm Mexican. Because when you grow up in California, when people think illegal or fake anything, they think Mexican, right? And I'm like, yo, my name's Jose, but I'm Filipino. But I didn't do that. I just went home, I rode my bike, got home, and then confronted my grandfather. I wrote it. And without me even saying anything, all he did was like, he looked at me and he said, "What are you doing showing that to people?" Green card. The second thing, you're not supposed to be here. You're not supposed to be here. So there's two things that I always struggle with. So My grandfather saved enough money, $4,500, to buy these two things. And I hate to think that I was worth $4,500. And the line that you're not supposed to be here, I don't think there's a single day in my life that I don't think about that. The next 2 years proved really critical. I was a freshman when I found out in high school. I kind of just gave up. This was before Google, so I couldn't Google anything. There was no Dream Act or immigration reform. So I never even took the SATs because what would be the point? I never even really thought of college. The next year was important because my English teacher, Mrs. Brewer, says I asked too many annoying questions and I should do this thing called journalism. I didn't know what that was. And my English wasn't that great. And I have to tell you, the first thing I did when I found out that I was quote-unquote illegal was to get rid of my Filipino accent. The Philippine alphabet doesn't have an H sound or an F sound, so I would say like the cat instead of the cat. And so I remember once at night, standing in front of the mirror in the bathroom, putting my tongue between my teeth, and practicing saying the cat. Because I knew that if I sounded like I had some sort of an accent, they're going to think that I'm not supposed to be here. So I knew that I had to sound right. I needed to sound like Charlie Rose and Andrew Green Gables. And I knew that I had to sound like Dr. Brain and Mel. I knew that I had to sound so American that no one would ever bow arguing with the fact that I am. And then when you become a journalist, there's this thing called a byline, which means that your name is in it. So I was 17 and I thought, wait a second, if I can't be here because I don't have the right kind of papers, what am I on the paper? How can they say I don't exist? I've written like 800 articles. My name's all over Google. I've interviewed, Al Gore, Beyonce, Hillary Clinton. Like, somebody made a Wikipedia page and it's actually pretty accurate. Like, how do they say I don't exist? Right. And to me, journalism was a way for me to kind of get to know this country and my place in it and how I can contribute to it. Then the following year, things got a little more complicated because during my U.S. history class, Mr. Farrell showed a documentary called The Life and Times of Harvey Milk. I didn't know what Harvey Milk was. But I was sitting in the back of the class, and I knew that I was undocumented, and I also knew that I was gay. And then at the end of this film, there's this quote: "If a bullet should enter my brain, let that bullet shatter any closet door." And I remember sitting in the back of the class, and I couldn't be in two closets at once. I had to get out of one. So I raised my hand, Mr. Farrell called on me, and then I'm like, blah, 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 I'm gay. I told both of us. And then I walked out. I went to the bathroom, I sat there, the bell rang, it was brunch, and then my girlfriend, Patricia, found out that this had happened. But see, this is where it gets complicated. My grandfather's plan was I was supposed to work under-the-table jobs, and then I was supposed to marry a woman and get a green card. Like Senator Bolton in the proposal, but that was the plan. But I told my grandfather, I couldn't do this. I couldn't lie about things else. I couldn't. But even though I came out of this gay closet when I was 18, I stayed inside another closet, this immigration closet, for more than 12 years. And people need to understand that being a documented person in America is to be obsessed with documents, with pieces of papers. I was able to get jobs, and I was able to lie my way into getting jobs because of two pieces of documents. Here's the first one. When I told my grandfather I wanted to work at Subway making meatball sandwiches, he said I gotta get this thing called Social Security number. I didn't know what that was. So one day he showed up and he gave me his card. You see the thing that got crossed off? It says not valid for work without authorization. So my grandfather drove me to Kinko's, and he cut a piece of white tape, and then he put it on top of the thing, and we made 20 photocopies. And that's the photocopy Social Security number I gave Subway sandwiches, the San Francisco Chronicle, the Philadelphia Daily News, the Huffington Post, the Washington Post, the Pulitzer Committee when I got nominated, and the White House when I had to run the White House State Dinner, when President Bush was president. And here's where it is. this number wasn't supposed to be used. I kept waiting, and then I started figuring out, is it because I look the way that I do? Is it because I'm not that brown? Is it because I talk English like this? Like, why didn't anybody ever wonder? And what was interesting, too, was then I started hearing from the government, not like immigration people, but the IRS. So the IRS doesn't care whether or not I have papers. The IRS cares whether or not I pay taxes. And I am paying so much taxes, I might as well be a Republican. And that is with all respect to the Republicans and Democrats. I don't know if people know this, but undocumented people pay billions of dollars in taxes. In 2010, undocumented people paid $11.2 billion in state and local taxes. That is a fact from the Institute for Taxation and Economic Policy that our media, from television and print, doesn't seem to cover when we talk about this issue. Here in the state of Michigan, undocumented workers, which make up about 2% of your workforce, paid $142 million in state and local taxes in 2010. That's $28 million in state income tax. That's $12.5 million in property taxes, because we own property. And that's about $100 million in sales taxes, because when you and I go to Starbucks, you pay the exact same sales tax. The second piece of document I have to get for myself. When I was 22, the Washington Post called and offered me an internship. This was a pretty prestigious internship. Only 20 people get it, 800 people apply. When I got the call, the first person I called was my principal, my high school principal, who was my mentor, so my mom. And I called my principal and I said, it might take me somebody else's spot. Because you know, when you grow up in this country, they call you illegal. People just think that you just take. And Pat, my principal on the other end of the line, laughed. And she said, don't think like that. You earned it. Okay, so I was going to go. And then the Washington Post recruiter said, you can't show up here without a driver's license. You know, I hadn't gone back to the DMV since the incident when I was 16. But I knew I wanted the job. And I knew to learn to drive. So there's this thing in America called federalism, which means that every state determines its own DMV requirements. So I spent 10 hours as a reporter researching the requirements for each one of the 50 states to get a driver's license, and figured out that Tennessee and Oregon had the most lenient requirements. So Tennessee was all the way over there, and Oregon was up there, so I went to Oregon. Here it is. Isn't this your nightmare? Your driver's license is blown up. So this license was issued to me, as you can see, on June 4th, 2003. It expired, it says, February 3rd, 2011, which precisely was my 30th birthday, which meant that I had 8 years. So I thought, maybe I can do everything I can to be so successful in these 8 years that I would get citizenship. That's what I told myself. I thought maybe I should write for like the New York Times or the Washington Post. I thought maybe I should win like a big prize, like a Pulitzer thing. I thought maybe I should write for this thing called the New Yorker, because that's what like really intelligent, influential people read. And I just thought within 8 years, this would be solved. Right? And how many people here have driver's license? Can you raise your hand? Okay, stay. Can you like hug it, kiss it, frame it, sleep with it? This was my only piece of ID. I dropped it once at a bar in San Francisco and I completely flipped out. This is my only piece of ID. And I thought within 8 years, this would be solved. And there it was in 2010. This deadline in my head, February 3rd, 2011, raining my year. And I landed the biggest assignment of my life, which was profiling Mark Zuckerberg for this thing called the New Yorker. And Mark, by the way, is not that guy. He's not that antisocial guy that you saw in that Facebook movie. He's actually pretty friendly. And you know, as a journalist, our job was to ask really uncomfortable questions. Like, hey, did you steal the idea of the political guy? Like, you know, are you really taking over the world? Why? Do you need all this money? So I was asking all these uncomfortable questions. And Mark, at one point during our 5-day interview process, I had 5 interviews with him. At one point, when we were walking down California Avenue in downtown Palo Alto, me and he asked me the most basic question. Where are you from, Jose? And I remember physically stopping as we were walking and looking at him and then giving him like one of my crazy eyebrow hits. I mean, the simple answer was where I was from Mountain View, which is the town next to Palo Alto. So that was the simple answer. But I couldn't give that answer. Because where I was from was, I was lying about a big part of who I am and how I got here while working as a journalist whose job it is to report and seek the truth. Where I was from was I was working and hiding and living comfortably, very comfortably, while young undocumented people called dreamers started coming out and risking their lives to fight for immigrant rights. Where I was from, I was almost 30 years old and I couldn't face my own life. I didn't have any photos of my family in the house because I couldn't think about my mother, who I hadn't seen almost at that point 18 years. I couldn't face my own life and I couldn't face my own mom. So I decided I had enough of this. And I was going to tell my own story. And this time, I was going to be telling people that I really exist. So I did this. It's not a horrible photo. So against the advice of about 31 lawyers, I admitted to everything that I had to do. The fraud, the lying, the checking the boxes I wasn't supposed to check. And I published this 4,000-word essay in the New York Times Magazine. But to me, the other big part of this essay, of my own coming out, was that I also outed, with their permission, of course, the Good Samaritans and the people who helped me out along the way. So this is Pat Hyland and Rich Fisher. That's my high school principal and my high school superintendent. They were the first people that I told that I was undocumented because I couldn't apply for financial aid in college. And they were the ones who found a scholarship fund to send me to college. Whenever something happened, like I had to get a Hillary Clinton's plane and I was worried that the social security number wasn't going to check. Whenever I had to make a decision about, so do I go to Oregon and get this driver's license? Whenever I had to make a decision that wasn't black or white, they were usually my first phone call. I don't know what I would have done. When I got to the Washington Post, 4 months after getting hired, I started kind of freaking out because I thought I had the word illegal tattooed on my forehead. I decided I was going to tell somebody. So I picked this guy named Peter Earl, who had been very nice to me. I took him for a walk, and I told him everything. I told him everything, the lies, the boxes, the fraud, all of it. And Peter said 2 things. The first thing he says, you make so much more sense now. Second thing, don't tell anybody else. We're in this together. Keep going. This man kept my secret and lied for me and risked his own career. And you really have to wonder, how do the other Peter Pearls do this every day? For journalists, for students, for construction workers, for whatever field. And whenever we talk about immigration, where are they in this conversation? If every undocumented person has at least 3 or 4 or 5 people in their lives who are helping them out every day, then we're talking about an issue that impacts way more than 11 million people. Right? And then all of this happens. I'm on the Colbert Report, I do Bill O'Reilly, I hear all the talk radio stuff, and then like nothing happens. No one contacts me. And so I decided that I was going to write a follow-up story about what it's like to be in this country as publicly as an undocumented person. And so I did. I contacted the editor of Time Magazine. And after writing the story, they were like, hey, we'll put you on the cover. And I'm like, no, I've already done that. I didn't like it very much. So I said, what if we found like 35 other people and put them on the cover? And the photo editor was like, where are you going to find them? So, a year after coming out in the New York Times Magazine, this is what we did. Can you imagine 36 undocumented people from 15 different countries? Mexico, Guatemala, Korea, the Philippines, Nigeria, undocumented African, Germany, undocumented European, 15 people, 15 countries represented that show the complexity and the diversity of this issue. So when you call us illegal, you're actually just scratching the surface because you're not asking the question of why are we even here? Right. And guess what? Every single one of the 36 people live in a household where there's at least one person who's an American citizen. It's called a mixed status family household. There are 17 million households in America where at least one person is an adoptee. And it was interesting for me, as I travel around the country, and people thinking I'm Latino and Mexican because this is my name, is actually just encountering people who are trying to break through the narrative of this issue. So 2 weeks ago, I spoke at Duke University and the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And this woman tweeted at me publicly, how do you overcome feeling ashamed of your status? When did you stop feeling illegal? And I'm like looking at her and I'm thinking, okay, she looks African American, but I don't know, like, what's going on? So at this talk, this woman actually showed up physically. And during the Q&A, she came up to the mic and she said, hi, I'm Daisy. I was born in Ghana. I lived in when I was 4. I'm 31, and I'm undocumented. And the whole audience just kind of gasped and looked at her. And she turned around and she said, yes, we're not all Hispanics. And then she said, there's so much shame within the African community and the Caribbean community to talk about this issue. So as I've been traveling around the country for the past 2 years, I've been filming the whole time. I've been filming a documentary called Documented. And the very piece of ID that I used to hate when I was younger, you know, I hated this green card. I hated everything this fake green card represented. I didn't understand why my grandfather did what he had to do. I didn't understand why he had to cost $4,500. And I resented them for it when I was younger. It took me a while to realize the sacrifice that they had to do and why they did what they did. So in honor of my grandfather, who passed away a few years ago, I decided that at the very poster of this film, I was given his green card in honor of him. And to me, the film shows the consequences of a broken immigration system, which is really broken families, which is really broken lives. So I haven't seen my mother for 20 years, since last August. I can't leave, because if I leave, I won't be able to come back. She can't come here because she can't get a visa. So I decided that the film had to go where I couldn't go. So I sent the film through the filmer. And as you can imagine, it was a rather surreal, intense experience to be seeing your mother for the first time on screen, talking to you, and explaining why she did what she did. And then, you know, she's waiting for you. And no matter how old I am, I still need a mother. So the film for me is a way of answering questions. The questions that I get asked that to me underscore the fact that immigration is the most controversial, yet least understood issue in America. I get asked questions like, why are you even here? Like, why are Filipinos here in America? There are 4 million Filipinos in America, we're the 3rd largest immigrant group, Mexicans, Chinese, and Filipinos. And a way for me to address this question is actually the first 2 lines of the film. This is the first 2 lines of the film. Growing up in the Philippines, I always knew I was going to America. America seemed inevitable. This was my own way of bringing in really the 2 key issues that we rarely talk about when we talk about immigration. What does U.S. foreign policy and U.S. trade agreements have to do with migration pattern? Why are people here? What is the history of the Philippines? Who used to own the Philippines? Right. What does NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, have to do with Mexicans risking their lives and crossing borders just so they can feed their families? Because guess what? I am here because you were there. We are here because you were there. Right? I get asked questions like, so why haven't you gotten deported? That's probably one of my favorite questions, because I don't really know why not. So this is actually a scene from the film.
A new illegal immigration law that's said to be the toughest in the nation allow officials to check the immigration status of students in public schools and give the police new powers to determine whether someone is in the country illegally.
But it goes beyond the legal issue. In part, what happens next to the 4% Latinos in Alabama and to the rest of Alabama's immigrants depends on whether or not this starts being treated in Alabama as not just a demographics issue, but as a civil rights issue.
So can you tell me a little bit about how this impacts you personally? Do you know people who are undocumented?
I do know some people who are undocumented, and I know people who are documented, and it creates a level of fear for them. Where, Thomas Jefferson said, you should never fear your government, the government should fear you. Where this produces. Yeah.
Just sound like garbage. Yes, I do. Get the motherfuckers out of here. That's what I agree with. Yeah. All right. Get your papers and get out. That's what I agree with. That's what I agree. You got your papers? Well, you need to get your ass on to them. That's what I say.
Okay.
That'll be my response. No, we're going nowhere. I'm chilling. You shut up.
What a big shit ass.
Shut your face.
Don't embarrass me.
So you take the steps necessary to go to the United States? There is a couple steps.
What? There's no steps, man.
My mom wanted to give me a better life also as well. So she sent me to live with her parents in California.
Alright.
So I guess, yeah, a little bit, I found out that it's illegal. And then I'm like, shit, I better speak English about it, or else you're gonna think I'm illegal. I'm gonna work my ass off. Work for the Washington.
So
We paid my taxes since I was 18. We paid my taxes since I was 18.
good.
That's good, man.
That's great. The thing is, though, you came over here, you became a productive member of society. Alright?
Everybody wants to.
Everybody does.
Yeah.
When you got hordes of people coming over here, and they're staying at 10 deep in a fucking apartment, and they're loading down, I'm a contractor. I'm a blue collar guy. I build houses, you know what I'm saying? When you got somebody up there working on a house for $10, you got another one that's having to do it for like $20 or $30.
I own 32 acres here.
And are you born and raised here in Alabama?
Yes, born here and raised in Alabama. I don't farm on the scale I did at one time for the simple reason that I'm getting older. Paco is a nickname of my Latino worker. It's a friendship, and he works with me also. I'd rather say he works with me than for me. If I go to Paco's house, his 3 children come hug me just like my grandkids come hug me. That's one of the group. His little son, the youngest one, but her son.
These teachers and educators were tasked to ask for their immigration status for their students. In the state of Alabama, before the federal judge issued an injunction, it was a crime for an undocumented person to get in any business transaction with the government, which means getting water in your house, was actually a crime. In the state of Alabama in 2013. And so, as people get deported every day, I'm, frankly, the guilt that I feel over being able to do what I get to do, which to me is raising consciousness as much as possible. So I actually decided that I'm going to call the government myself and figure out why they haven't contacted me. So here's another scene from the film. And the woman that was their grandmother.
It's been about a year since I've written that essay, coming out essay, and I haven't heard from anybody, and so I'm gonna call them myself. Hi.
And I said, look, I'm on deadline. This is going to be in the cover. in the economy. And you know what she said? She said, no comment. No comment. And you know, and then I started thinking, it's kind of like a metaphor for what society thinks of us. No comment. I mean, you all know we're here. It's not like we're hiding from you. You know your economy. A big part of this country's economy depends on undocumented workers. And you know that we can't all babysit your kids and mow your lawns and serve your kids. So, the question really is, what do you want to do with us? Like the ball is in your court. You know, for years, for a decade, a large part of my fear in outing myself, of facing this undocumented life head-on and full-on, was my unwillingness to face some daily facts that you and I live with daily. The nightmare that every day 1,000 people, mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, are deported by the Obama administration. The Obama administration has deported more than 1.5 million immigrants, 2 million by next year. That's more than any other modern president. The nightmare that as we speak, tens of thousands of immigrants, mothers and daughters, sons and fathers are locked in detention centers all across the country, imprisoned for the benefit of our country's ever-growing, money-making prison industrial complex. The nightmare that as we speak, countless students in states across America, including here in Michigan, who grow up in America and who call America home, are forced to pay out-of-state foreign student rates because we don't think they are our kids. The nightmare that as we speak, someone somewhere, a man is driving on the freeway, and he is stopped by a cop or a sheriff for speeding, and his heart falls to his stomach and he pees his pants. He fears for his life because he doesn't have a valid license, or the license he got, he was supposed to get. So that was me in March 4th, 2008. In Dallas, Texas, while I was covering the Texas Democratic primary. I peed my pants when the sheriff stopped me. Thankfully, the sheriff got another call and said, hey, I like the Washington Post, don't speed. And he let me up. We are living in this age of intersectionality, this era of empathy. The fact that my equality is tied to your equality. You don't have to be gay to fight for LGBT rights. You don't have to be a woman to be a feminist. You don't have to be black to care about the Trayvon Martin tragedy. You don't have to be Latino to care about immigrant rights. You don't have to be any of these things to treat people and human beings with dignity. My name's Jose. That's as Latino as it gets. I look like, y'all name a little bit. I'm gay. I'm undocumented. In college, I majored in political science and African American studies. I should just marry a Jew or a Native American and call it a day. But as far as I'm concerned, I am American. And let me end where I started. Provocative questions like, where are you from? How did you get here? How do you define America? Tomorrow, Thursday, Governor Brown in California is going to sign a bill, a driver's license bill, that will give driver's licenses to undocumented people in the state of California. So here's my question. If you're in Michigan, if you think that your undocumented neighbors and classmates and friends should be given driver's licenses by this great state of Michigan, can you stand up? Oh, you're taking a photo, wait. So we email this to the governor. All right, cool. Yeah. It's really been a privilege to come to a community college. These community colleges, in many ways, are at the heart of the higher education in this country, and that rarely gets recognized. And I wonder if this community college, this community, could be at the forefront of making sure that undocumented students in Michigan get the treatment they deserve as students, and that your undocumented neighbors get the licenses that they need just to be able to, go to the grocery store and drop the kids off to school and go to work. So I'm going to end it with this. Today I've been asked by a few people, how does somebody like me make it every day, knowing the situation that me and 11 million people are in? And to calm myself, to find peace in all of this, I really hold on to this idealistic part of me. And know and believe that we are all witnesses to each other. This is a marriage you and I. And every day for the past, 14 years, I've been reading this poem. It's by my favorite writer, a man named James Baldwin. James Baldwin, he was gay and black at a time in which America could only deal with the black part and didn't know what to do with the gay part. And this poem is called Some Days. And to me, this is like a prayer. And given that I'm speaking and we're in this lovely, lovely church, I thought it would be appropriate. And I want you to listen to these words and think about the everyday injustices, inhumilities, and indignities that people of all kinds, undocumented people, go through. It goes, some days worry, some days glad, some days more than make you mad. Some days more than shine. When you see what's coming on down the line. Some days you say, oh, not me, never. Some days you say, bless God forever. Some days you say, curse God and die. And the day comes when you wrestle with that lie. Some days tussle and some days groan. And some days don't even leave a bone. Some days you hassle all alone. I don't know, sister, what I'm saying. Nor do no man if you don't be praying. I know that love is the only answer, and the tightrope lover the only dancer. When the lover come off the rope today, the net which holds him is how we pray, and not to gods unknown, but to each other. The falling mortal is our brother. Some days believe, some days grieve, some days you don't believe. Some days believe you, some days don't. Some days believe you and you won't. Some days worry, some days mad, some days more than make you glad. Some days more than shine. Witnesses, all of us. Witnesses coming on down the line. History will record that in this period of great transition, the greatest tragedy is not the strident clamor of the bad people, but the appalling silence of the good people. We cannot afford for you to be silent. We need you to speak up. Thank you very much for having me. Great, so there's a mic. You need to ask them uncomfortable questions, so please.
Thank you, my brother Jose.
Oh, thanks, man.
My name is Smooth. Nice to meet you. I'm glad you came so far.
Oh,
to
thank
be
you.
with us today. I have 3 short questions to ask you.
You have 3?
Sure.
Okay, sure.
The first question is, what do you do and how do you qualify to receive a green card? The second question, have you ever heard of The third question is, what would you do if this was your final moment on earth? What would you do if this was your final moment on earth?
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Jose.
You're welcome. What do you do to get a green card? Okay, that's way too long of an answer. But what I can tell you is if you think the tax code is complicated, look at the immigration code. I mean, it is the most complex system. I have 9 lawyers. And now the only thing that I can't do is marry my way to citizenship because DOMA, the Domestic Marriage Act, got struck down. So if I find a partner, I'm not seeing anybody. But if I find a partner, I can actually get married that way. But I don't know. We'll see. Second, was that the Buddhist chant?
Yes, sir.
Tina Turner, what's love got to do with it? That's the first time I heard that chant. Now you all want to get remember that. Third thing, what would I do? This is my last one on earth. Two things. One, I'd call my mom. Second thing, I will probably go to a church and say thank you. Because I think you find purpose when you find gratitude. No one else is going to ask me a question. Yes. Oh, yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Paulo Bale, the editor of GRCC.com.
What was that?
Editor of a website. The name is GRCC.com. Please, people buy the names, which is the right name. It's called right.
What was that?
Well, the question is what is it about immigration reform? Is it not passed in the Congress? Or?
Is it going to pass it? We all know that we have a government shutdown, right?
I know.
Our politicians, who are supposed to be adults, I don't know. I was really optimistic, as I'm sure you were, about immigration reform earlier this year. But given the theatrics that is coming out of Washington, D.C., I'm not sure anymore. This is why I actually think immigrant rights may go in the way of LGBT rights, meaning they may go state by state by state. And what can different states be doing? Governor Brown tomorrow, when he signs that bill to give people ID driver's licenses, I will go to every state I can possibly go to and ask people in that state, why can't they do the same? Right? So I think trying to figure out what we can do to offer relief, we can't keep waiting for a Congress that is as dysfunctional as this one. Right? So for me, that's the way this is going to go. And I'm going to try as much as possible, to go state by state and try to figure out what we can do.
There is a chance for for this proposal to pass in the Congress.
Something I wrote, so was that, so what needs to change?
The chances for
The chances?
Yeah.
See, I don't think we've had an honest conversation with the American public about immigration. The fact that you have border security dominating the conversation, never mind that, the U.S.-Mexico border is the number of border crossings are its lowest levels since Nixon was president. And we haven't even talked about the fact that we have a schizophrenic policy when it comes to the border. We tell the border, keep out, we have a sign at the border that says keep out, and then 10 yards in we say help wanted. We are a country addicted to cheap labor. Everybody but undocumented people benefit, especially employers, benefit from the system being broken. But this is a reality that we haven't even come to grips with. So the chance is not very high.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi. Thank you for joining this process.
Oh, thank you for having us.
My name is Anna. I have been dating a guy for about 5 years who is an undocumented immigrant from Mexico. And his story is remarkably similar to yours in a lot of ways, except that according to our lawyers, marriage would not solve his immigration problem.
Why? Can you tell us why?
Well, why? That's a good question. Immigration law, maybe this is follow-up, but immigration law is incredibly confusing to me.
Yes.
Because I've heard different things from different lawyers. But the main reason I've heard is that there's a punishment.
Yes.
Penalty he has to pay, and that's in time. He has to go back to Mexico 5 to 10 years.
For 10 years, yes.
10 years. Serve that time, so to speak, until he can apply for immigration. because he feels like family, even though he's not legally my family at this point. And it's hard. So I just was wondering if you could give advice to people like me, if there's anything that we can do to help these girls.
Like, you're already doing a lot, but just say hi to people. Hi. More business, say hi. But that's really a lot. Because people don't know